Hey guys, welcome back. Today I'm painting up a Necron model which was voted on for this month's Patreon video, and I decided to go with the Psychomancer, and I've been wanting to paint this model for some time now, so I 3D printed the model and got it prepared by priming it in some Green Stuff World matte black primer. And the first part of the process, I'm going to be tackling the metallics, and I'm going to be going for a classic Necron silver with some gold trim. And to achieve this, I'm just going to be using some Army Painter gun metal and dry brushing this on to all of the metallic areas on the model. And the only areas that I'm going to be leaving in the primer is the skull on the front of the model and the blade of the weapon as well. And then before moving on to the gold trim, I'm firstly going to base coat all of the gold areas in a dark brown, and I'm going to be using some Army Painter Banshee brown, but as I said, any kind of dark brown should do here. And the idea here is that the brown base coat should allow for an easier application of the gold, as sometimes gold can be a bit of a funny colour to brush on and can sometimes take 2 or 3 coats, and by painting in the brown first should allow for the gold to be applied in 1 coat. And then for the gold itself, I'm just going to come in with some Army Painter Greedy Gold and paint over all of the brown areas painted in the previous step. Next, I'm going to be applying some contrast paint to all of the silver and gold metallics. Firstly with some Vallejo Express Battle Dress Brown, and I'm going to be applying this all over the gold areas, and this should flow into all of the recesses, applying some additional shade to the areas, as well as tinting the gold a little and giving it a warmer colour. And I'm just going to do the exact same thing for the silver areas, only this time I'm going to be using some Army Painter Gravelord Grey and just applying this all over the silver. And after allowing that time to fully dry, I then go back in with the original metallic colours, which was the Greedy Gold and the Gun Metal, and I'm just going to be dry brushing both of these on to their respective areas, aiming to hit all of the upward facing areas, just to bring back some of the shine to all of the highlights. And that should give me a little bit of a transition between the shiny highlights and the dulled down shaded areas. And now that the metallics were finished, I'm going to move on to the skull and the blade of the weapon, and any other area that I'm going to be painting in with an accent colour. And to start that off, I'm going to be dry brushing these areas in some Army Painter Company Grey, which is going to allow me to apply the accent colour, giving it a really nice and bright, punchy effect. So I'm just going to dry brush or paint in these areas with the Company Grey and build it up to a nice, bright off-white colour. And I'm just going to be working one section at a time, using some AK masking putty to cover up the rest of the model, as in the next stage I am going to be bringing out the airbrush, and this will protect the rest of the model from any overspray. I'm then going to come in with some Rowney Purple Lake ink, which is a really vibrant purple colour, and these inks, like the Rowney and the Liquitex, which I've been using quite a lot in my previous videos, really provide a lot of vibrancy and colour that is very difficult to achieve just using standard acrylic paints. And as they are so thin out of the bottle, they can be a little bit tricky to apply over a white surface using a brush. However, when using an airbrush over a white or off-white surface, produces a super smooth and really vibrant colour that just needs one coat. I'm then going to come back in with the same Army Painter Company Grey and reapply the dry brush over the skull area, but this time I'm only going to apply the dry brush to the skull and not to the surrounding cubes at either side. I'm then going to come in with another ink, this time some Liquitex Magenta, and I'm just going to airbrush this over the previously applied Company Grey, which should push the skull into more of a magenta colour, while leaving the cubes at either side in the darker purple. And I just applied the exact same technique to the blade of the weapon, and the orb on the back, and also the eye as well. And for the eye I just used a normal brush to paint in the Company Grey, and then used the brighter inks with a brush as well, as these areas are far too small for the airbrush. And to add some definition to all of these purplish magenta areas, I'm going to be applying some edge highlights using some Army Painter Diviner Light, which is the brightest colour in the magenta triad. And I'm just going to hit all of the hard edges on all of the purple and magenta areas, which, due to all of the cubes on either side of the skull, is a bit of a chore, but this will help to define all of these areas and make them a little bit more readable. And don't worry too much if your edge highlighting isn't perfect like mine and is a little bit blobby and inconsistent at times, as I'm just going to come back in with the purple or magenta ink depending on the area and use this to clean up the edge highlights and tone them down a little bit as well. The Diviner Light is quite a bright off-white colour, and going back in with the original inks just with a brush not only tidies up those uneven edges but also tones it down a little bit and makes the edge highlights a little bit more subtle. And after hitting all of the edge highlights and allowing the ink to fully dry, the model was now complete. And although I used a very basic process of dry brushing some metallics over black to create the metal areas, by then coming in with the vibrant ink colours, you can elevate your model with some really interesting and bright colours that would have been really difficult to achieve with standard acrylic paints. But in any case, let me know what you think in the comments down below. And as always, a massive thank you to all of my Patreon and YouTube members. Your continued support is truly appreciated. And if you want to have a say in the models that I paint each month, I'll leave a link to my Patreon and YouTube membership down below. And I'll see you in the next one.